Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Keeping It Spiritually Simple. And I am so delighted and honored to invite one of my mentors and someone I consider just a leading authority on so many things. And I love the way she expresses and explains things. And right now, we've gone through this eclipse, this full moon, and what everyone's experiencing. And Miss Elizabeth Wood, Mrs. Elizabeth Wood, whatever you like to call yourself, I would love to hear your thoughts on what's happening.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to talk about it. It was a really cool moon. I got to see the full eclipse here in Ecuador. It was very clear and very spectacular. Always makes me wonder why the Earth's shadow is red.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and I never can explain that quite, but it's very interesting to me. And I can see why people over all these eons have been really freaked out by full moon eclipses. One of the most favorite stories is the ancient Chinese believing that a giant frog in the sky came and swallowed it, and then they'd beat their pots and pans outside and ring bells to scare the frog away so that it would spit the moon out.
That's the first I've heard that one.
That's my favorite. And it's interesting because, right before the call, we were discussing a little bit about how deeply affected people feel by this kind of stuff. And in anthropology, we have terms for this because people do feel affected by it, but culturally, it's not universal. So say people in North America and people in South America and people in Africa and India, they all feel differently and they have different stories about why something might be happening. It's not a universal thing, which is very important because that means that there's no wrong way to look at this. It's a bit of a different mindset shift than to say, hey, this is the right way to look at it and all of you are wrong. Instead, we say, well, there's no wrong way to look at this. The Earth could be on the back of turtles infinitely, as many native peoples believe. So these things are really important. Like I'm personally am not I don't believe that the Earth is flat, but at the same time, I believe that there's a reason why people feel this way and are so deep in their feeling that this is true. There's a reason, and it's because there is, and it's not what people think. It's because there's an infinite number of ways or possibilities that something can be. And what you're tapping into is that infinite number of ways that something can be. So the moon could be being swallowed by a galactic frog. That's a possibility in reality. It's a possibility in the source field. The source field thought of it, and therefore a whole bunch of people believed for a very long time that that was real and that that's true. And it helped them explain what they were seeing with the cultural context that they had. Same with the flat Earth concept, or how, for example, certain planets affect us. Mercury retrograde is really important, for example. And people will often, depending on the cultural context, feel very strongly about Mercury retrograde. The only group that doesn't feel that Mercury retrograde is a bad thing is the Ayurvedic tradition, which is a long-standing, ancient, and very well-established tradition. So the cultural context and the way we look at something paints a picture. It gives us a lens to look at it. And that's going to affect you the way that you choose as a creator being. I would argue that eclipses and retrogrades and flat or globe theories, all of these are through the lens of cultural context. All of them are plausible and have reasons for people believing them that are really valid reasons. And none of it should be dismissed. It should be basically turned into a tapestry of possibilities, and then you have the fifth dimension. So when you're really willing to look at all the possibilities as part of a tapestry, you enter into the fifth dimension. So people are wondering, how do I get to the fifth dimension? Be accepting. be willing to acknowledge that the beliefs and ideas and the cultural context that someone else has is just as valid as yours, because it literally exists. The simple fact that it exists, that's valid. Now, this can get into deep, deep waters. We could talk about racism in this context, but here's the thing. Those concepts have some boundaries and lines because they harm other people. Believing that the moon is being swallowed by a frog doesn't hurt anybody. Believing that the earth is flat or round does not hurt anyone. And so then we get into the semantics of right speech. And right thinking, right action, and right speech really come to play when we're looking at how the galaxy and the moon and the stars and the spheres affect us, because they certainly do. But how are they going to affect you? That's what you get to choose. Now, when it comes to, say, racism, there's a line there, and we don't have to cross that line because it hurts people. It doesn't hurt anyone to allow a variety of beliefs about the moon. So that's where my line is. People would want to know that. I think it's very key. There is only one race, and that's called the human race. So that's my viewpoint on, what do the spheres do to us? It'll do to you as you wish. You are a creator of that. And for me, I decided to enjoy it and ask strange questions like, why is the shadow of the earth red? I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I'm sure many other people have many different descriptions as to why. Maybe it's because the earth's blood is red or something cool like that. I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows? I know that people's belief systems will affect them in many different ways. And again, that's all about that pre-programming too, So what about the all that effect on the galactic temperature and the temperature of the planet and the temperature that it's affecting us physically?
Yes, and it's funny that you say temperature, because actually we could talk about both actual temperature.
Yeah.
Because the solar system is getting hotter.
Yes.
Which is kicking the earth into an ice age. And the sun is affecting the climate, not humans. That's not true. The climate is mainly affected by the sun and the cycles that the sun goes through. I think human-made climate change is now pretty much over with that concept because of a very simple study that was done recently. Basically, rotting wood makes 500 times more carbon than humans do every year. And so if carbon's the problem, which we know from science that it's not, especially not only galactic science, but Earth-based weather science and even geology science, we're going through a very big change. And the attempt at turning human consciousness into human fault, we call that the human hate program. That is something that distracts us from actually taking a look at what's really happening galactically, which is deeply affecting us. And it's not just an esoteric effect, although that's definitely happening. So we have the wave of the black hole, this big, huge galactic electromagnetic wave that comes every 12,000 years. It's upon us right now. And it causes the Earth's electromagnetic field to disappear. And so right now it's about 30% gone. And we're getting bombarded big time by all sorts of interesting radiation. And that radiation certainly is going to have a dramatic effect on the weather. There's even brand new sightings of new kinds of lightning that probably people saw 12,000 years ago, but this is new to us. And why is that happening? Well, because of the changes with the electromagnetic current that's happening between the sun and the earth and the galaxy. So we're going to see more and more wild stuff. Now, all of this is written about. It's all stuff that we could expect, and we're heading into an ice age. So we need to be prepared for that. It's going to get colder, not hotter. And there's a really neat effect that the earth has. When a certain amount of ice is melted, it kicks into a very specific gear, and that gear causes the earth to basically refreeze all of its ice as basically a protective mechanism. So
Mhm.
it's pretty neat what's happening. And I think getting away from Edison-based technology is more important than anything. We need to get into ether tech and Tesla tech. That'll be protected if we get hit by any sort of solar flare at all. And there's a whole long list of things that can and will happen over the next 50 years. But that's really key. This is the first time I've spoke out about human-made climate change publicly, because most people will get canceled if they talk like that. But
Yeah.
I feel that the science is well established now, and more things are coming out, so it's safer for people like me to speak. But if we look at the esoteric piece, this is affecting people's minds dramatically. And this sounds very morbid, but it's important for us to think about. I'm a prepper. I have a prepper mindset. My father's a professional emergency preparedness teacher. And we always thought about plan A to Z. We always had a plan Z in place because we thought about the thing that might happen that probably wouldn't happen, the 0.0001% chance of that happening, but we still want to think about it and
Mhm.
prepare for it. So, that's my mindset. And so I'm always thinking about all these what ifs because they're on the plate, they're on the table, especially at the end of an age like we're in right now. And the what if is, what if there's no electromagnetic field? Well, that's exactly where we're heading. That's going to happen. What will happen? Well, we're already seeing animals start acting nuts. And biologists and animal observers are noticing big time over the past 10 years, but especially the past 2 or 3, that animals are doing very strange things and they can't be seemingly easily explained. Well, that's because of the electromagnetic field shift. And when mice were exposed to zero electromagnetic field, they immediately began to cannibalize each other.
Mm.
So what are we going to see? I don't think humans are going to end up easily becoming cannibals at all. That's kind of been a pretty well established taboo, except for a handful of tribes in the world. But this is causing agitation. It's causing people to feel like they're crazy and that they're losing their minds. And this kind of is part of what I had been calling the black wave of consciousness that a lot of ancient people and different kinds of prophecies have talked about, including Catholic prophecy. So like even Native Amazonian prophecy, they talk about it as the black wave of consciousness. It's upon us right now. And it's March 17th. And so right around here, now it's hit the throat. I could feel it today. And the way I'm feeling it in my body is, well, let me back up. So the past few months as this wave has been coming down, I've been feeling disconnected from source. I've been feeling like I'm losing my mind and like incredible amount of worthlessness coming up, which I struggle with. And a lot of this sort of I'm too weird to be loved energy. This is very personal. Everyone's going through their own stuff. And it might sound like this to you or the opposite. Like maybe instead of sad, you're angry, or maybe instead of feeling like you're going nuts, you have clarity, but it's like overwhelming clarity. And then it kind of was coming here and I was just feeling it kind of hit my subconscious in the back of my head. And that's when the eclipse was coming up. And the eclipse is this double shadow eclipse. It's an eclipse in Scorpio in the middle of the night. And so I'm like, all right, well, okay, if I'm gonna believe anything about this, I want to be shown. I want this energy to show me what's some of the stuff I'm still afraid of. Because in the mysticism that I teach and study, we seek out our fear. And if you want to be enlightened, you follow your fear. You don't follow your desires, you follow your fear. And so I want to know, like, am I hiding anything from myself? Oh my goodness, I got the craziest dream. And it laid out all my little hidden fears that I hadn't been acknowledging. It was very powerful. I got exactly what I asked for. This is a proof, that we're creator beings. Somebody else might have asked for something totally different, but this is what I got. I got what I needed. And then it hit the throat. And as it's hitting the throat, I'm finding myself feeling two different things. Feeling like I'm literally going to burst with how much I have to share and express. I told somebody I have galaxies of information inside of me, and I want people to want to listen to what I have to say. This is ego and personality and the personal self talking. All this is important. We need to pay attention to this. I'm a master of transcendence, Sandra, and I'm crap at being in my body. And so I've transcended everything, including all the things that I really want to express. And now I'm facing this backlog that I can't escape because I got to be in my body. I got to be human right now. And so this backlog is bursting out of me. And then all these feelings and emotions of intense love, intense unrequited love, intense sadness and emotion around relationship, which has been probably my biggest core wound. And this morning I'm like in the shower and I'm like gonna lose my crap. And and so I'm a singer. I have no other choice. All I could do is sing. So I sing as loud as I could at the top of my voice, this long blues song in my shower. It's pretty good. But just this song, I had to sing. I had to do something to get it out of my body through my voice. And so an interview today is perfect because I can express myself verbally. And that's happening to people. They're feeling like if they talk too much, that it's time for them to be quiet. So, or somebody might be feeling really balanced about their voice. And it's just coming up today like, wow, there's a lot of people who don't feel heard. They're noticing it outside themselves. And a lot of people who work really hard to be heard. And so there could be a lot of different ways that this is coming up in consciousness.
Right.
But it's continuing to press down, and this wave is revealing to us certain problem structures, wounds, ego, balances, things that are in balance. So when it hit my crown, I felt in balance, even though I felt a little disconnected. I also still felt like I'm still pretty balanced. I can easily go seek out source because I do constantly anyway. So even in that moment, if I felt disconnected, I know what to do.
Right.
But if somebody doesn't, then that's going to be wildly apparent to them. Wow, I feel so disconnected. How do I fix this problem? Well, now it's going to be hitting the upper heart, which is the high heart, the universal compassion, over the next week. And then as it moves into solstice, the summer solstice in the north, it's going to hit the heart. Now, I have some trepidation around this because that's the male power center. What's going to happen to all the men? Is it hits the heart, what will happen? If they have their hearts closed, it's going to feel like agony. And something's going to occur in the collective. I have no idea what. I only have a sense of timing because I've watched these waves work before, and they tend to work with the solar cycle. But this time it's so dense and it's so revealing. Anybody who's wearing armor around their heart is going to feel really uncomfortable, and it's going to be too heavy for them. So they're going to have to drop their armor. And if their heart is wide open and vulnerable and they feel raw and too vulnerable, that imbalance is going to come to play too. So we're looking at whatever's out of symmetry. Asymmetry makes consciousness move. It puts consciousness under pressure. If you're feeling too much of one thing and not enough of another, a wave like this is going to force you to see that. and feel it. And it's going to bring in events that will force you to acknowledge this. And then it's going to come down to the human power center, the solar plexus, and the stomach. And we're going to notice whether or not we have power or not. And then it's going to hit the female power center, the root. And then we're going to have probably a bigger explosion in consciousness than what happens with the heart. Because the feminine, right? The feminine is taking the reins of power again right now. And some of the feminine are able to pretty easily wrest it out of the hands of others around them, and others not so much. And the ones who aren't able to easily are going to get basically pushed into a level of righteous rage that is very unusual for them. And remember, the electromagnetic field disappearing is going to magnify this. So we are coming upon the divine feminine angry. And it's a righteous anger, not a vindictive one. If you feel vindictive, you need to check yourself. It's righteous in that it's clean. And then once this wave moves through the full embodiment, a second one will come. But it will have no warning. This one rolls through. The second one comes down like a hammer. And this is going to crush people's false reality. And a lot of people are in a false reality. They are in cozy corners of consciousness in the love and light sand with their head deep in, or they are in a hell world of their own creation, willingly allowing the demonic to create a hell world for them. They're not realizing that they're making deals for that to happen. But if you feel like you're in a little hell world and you can't get out, that's because it's real. Hell is very real. But the gates of hell are not just a couple of gates. There's a gate for each of us. Every single person has a perfectly made hell just for them. Hell is here. So is heaven. It's all here. It's available now. All those dimensions are available. They're wide open. They have been. And because people are stuck in some pretty wretched beliefs around that they have to go check out of the 3D and go to the 5th dimension, for example, which is just pure madness because you already had access the whole time to the whole thing anyway. So you shouldn't be leaving the human experience. You got invited here. This is a really important experience. You don't want to mess this one up. There are a lot of beings who were backed up in a waiting list, trillions and trillions of beings long, waiting to be human, and you got in, and they didn't. And so to throw this away, but the other one, Sandy, that's really on the table, and I'm just being really real today.
I love it. Please be real.
The other one that's on the table that's driving me crazy. Someone I care about said, wouldn't it be great if we could measure our growth without suffering? Can't we do all of this without suffering? And they're imagining a world, a life that doesn't have suffering to create learning. And I absolutely think that's madness. That's madness, because that is a complete and total misunderstanding of what suffering is. And this entire universe would not function without suffering. If you go and hang out and actually look at what happens in space, it's crazy. But would you call an asteroid hitting a random planet that's uninhabited suffering? Well, no, because you're not that planet or that asteroid. But when you say to somebody else, oh, you shouldn't have to suffer, well, that's literally going against the laws of the universe and nature. And suffering is another word for preference. I prefer personally not to feel so sad and angry about stuff, or not to feel unrequited love. That's a preference. That's my ego. That's my personality talking. That's my personal self. There's nothing wrong with ego. There's lots of types and layers of ego. You can't get rid of ego. That'd be crazy. Otherwise, you'd get hit by a bus. But you also can't get rid of suffering. Suffering is inherently part of this universe because half the dimensions of consciousness have duality in it. And if you're going to be in a place where duality is inherently built in, then asymmetry itself is suffering. So if you feel more worthless than you do arrogant, then you tend to swing your pendulum over here to arrogance and experience that for a while until you find out enough about both that you're willing to be finished. That's how you end suffering, is by fully experiencing the spectrum of symmetry available in consciousness. So there's a way to end suffering, but not until you've suffered well enough into wisdom. Knowing it doesn't count. You don't have, just knowing that you feel worthless, it's not good enough. You need to embrace worthlessness and get to know it. It's available in consciousness. Therefore, it is worthy of your attention. It is simply a frequency with wisdom in it. So when someone wants to throw suffering out, they're trying to throw half of the universe out. You know who else is trying to do that? Is the AI. The AI wants the metaverse to have no suffering and to have shallow relationships where a little like or a heart on your comment makes you feel good enough to get by. That is so shallow. Mm-hmm. It's so shallow, it's trying to erase all concepts of suffering. Therefore, it's going to get rid of anything that it deems imperfect, like gender. It's just going to throw it right out because gender causes suffering. Yeah, that's true, because it's a polarity.
Yes.
So does, what else is it trying to throw out? All sorts of stuff. Concepts of oneness. It wants you to be so individualized that you're unhappy with how individual you really are. And then there's not enough boxes for you to fit into. And then you have to carve out your own. And it's pretty lonely in your group because you're the only one. So it's trying to get rid of even categorization. It's trying to get rid of ethnicity and start to basically call everything race, which it's not. Race is what we would call a species. And we got to get perfectly technical about this stuff because people use this word race all the time and they don't know what they're talking about. They're literally talking about the whole human species. That's a race. An ethnicity or a phenotype is how you look. That's what they're talking about. And they're misconstruing it. Why? Because ethnicity has been erased. It's considered to cause suffering. So here we have a virtual world that's supposed to be a better copy of the universe because it doesn't have suffering or duality. So it's trying to remove all suffering and duality. And that's mind-blowing to me that anyone would buy into that anyone feels better on the virtual world. Really ask yourself, does being in the virtual world make you feel better? No one says yes, except for young men who are playing video games because that's the source of their social interactions. Mm-hmm. And they're saying it because they're actually dopamine addicts to the gaming world. That's why they say that they feel better, because they are getting high. It's no different than watching porn. Porn is also a dopamine addiction-based experience that was not available or real in human culture until modern times. Mm-hmm. So here we have such an interesting time. All these things are crumbling, and you get to have a choice. Are you going to go shallow? Is that wrong? Well, no. In the mysticism that I'm working with, no, there's no wrong way to do consciousness. What, I would argue is fine, then you're just going to be stuck. You're going to be trapped in that, and you're not going to get any higher and deeper. You're not going to experience the 12-dimensional, multidimensional experience that's available to you if you do that. So be it, if that's the choice that you're making as a soul. But for myself, the suffering is valid. It's important. It's vital for human experience. It's absolutely necessary for evolution. I would not be on this path at all if it weren't for the agony I've been through. It is so important to value suffering.
Mhm.
So as people are moving ahead, they don't want this. They're trying to escape it. But if you want to go higher, faster, follow your fear, follow your suffering, pay close attention to it, embrace it. It's your best friend. It will take you higher, faster. I mean, I like to use Jesus as an example. The Garden of Gethsemane is one of the most difficult things to read about because he knew exactly what was going to happen. And he had to recognize that with incredible clarity, a full-blown psychic being, knowing exactly what was going to happen. One of his dear friends who he'd only loved was going to betray him. All of his friends were going to mess up one way or another. And he was going to die a horrible, awful, psychotic death for no seemingly good reason. Justice was not going to prevail. So many things were going to fail. And he was going to have to do it all, knowing this all by himself. He was so nervous and so terrified, he was sweating blood. That means his blood pressure was sky high. And he was super, super scared. And he just asked for his friends to pray with him. And they couldn't even stay awake long enough to be with him really in this time that he knew what was going to happen. That's true suffering right there. And then he has to go through the experience, knowing still what was going to happen with all of his friends. And his mother was going to have to feel the entire thing that he went through because they were literally come from one body, made of one flesh, because he didn't have a human father. Mm-hmm. And so this is such a powerful story because all of us go through that. All of us have had those times where might as well be sweating blood. And right now is one of them. Right now, if you're really paying attention, it's one of them. And I wake up and I say, gosh, I wish I didn't know so much. I wish I didn't know what's really going on. I wish I didn't know what's going to happen over the next 50 years. And yet then I get on sessions, or I get to talk to you, Sandy.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, actually, now I'm really glad I know. I'm glad I know because I have compassion. And you know what happens? The reason why Jesus suffered so bad was because nobody understood him. He didn't have other people to help carry the cross. Somebody named Simon had to be basically forced to. But we don't have to do that to each other. We can make this light work, literally lighter work, because if we pay attention to what's going on and we keep connecting it to the universal experience, we're not going to fail. We're going to do what we came to do. Becoming a new species is one of the hardest things you can ever accomplish. And that's what we're here to do. And we're not going to fail because we're going to do it together. We're not alone. We are friends. We have Indra's net. And the second dimension, feel that net. That net is real. That's the real internet. They were trying to make a fake version and they failed miserably. Indra's net is full of richness. It's full of quality relationships. It's full of deep, true connection and pure light and power. It's full of the guts and the gusto and the strength that we have to be able to make it to this next level. It's all there. All you have to do is fall back and let it catch you. Indra's net catches you, and it's so clear to people right now. So this is what I see going on, Sandy. It's really intense, but I have a message of hope because we are in this little Gethsemane together, and we don't have to be alone in our suffering. We can stay up and stay awake together and keep the eye on the ball, and we'll carry this together. That's the point. Mm-hmm. You don't become a species alone. Yeah. Do it together.
But so many of us have felt alone. So many of us have been feeling like we're carrying this ball and doing our work, and we look around at people who are just in blankness. They're not really tapping into that side of it. And sometimes I get a little pissed, to be honest with you. I get like, come on, folks, I can't be the only one on this side of tug of war here. I need some team members. And slowly some will show up. But I know that no matter what anybody else is doing, I have to pay attention to what I know I need to pay attention to. And everything else is a distraction to me. And you're talking about the heaven and the hell. And I look at the hell as is like, if I designed my life with all these things and I'm human, I'm going to have all these sensories that I might not have in my light body, right? And so I'm here. And so hell is when I keep going down a path without learning my lessons and taking those lessons and turning them around and having them be more smooth for me. So it's experiences, right? So I'm not going down this one-way tunnel. I have an opportunity to stop, drop, sit, connect with my breath. What am I learning? What am I feeling? What am I wanting to take with me and take it back to the other side, which is more heavenly to me, And then I wouldn't change those deep pits of pain, emotionally, physically, mentally, etherically. I wouldn't have the success on the other side if I hadn't experienced those, and some are a lot deeper than others. So a lot of people we were talking about are experiencing, loss of vocal, the heat temperatures coming up. I even have a lot of male friends that I feel are going through menopause, and all kinds of things going on. So this is affecting all of us. Anything and also I want you to tell people what Indra's Net is, because they might not be familiar on my viewers. And I think it's important to talk about Indra's Net, talk about what can we do individually to help the collective. Because, every day when I do something, it's not just about me. Let's say if I'm doing my cards and I pick a card or I pick a glyph about something, right? It's not just about what's working on me at the moment. It's what's working on the collective at the moment. Just like when I do my grid work or my heavenly work or my earth work or whatever it is, it's not just about me. It's what can I do to enhance what's going on around me to help others and create a healthier net for them as well.
Yeah, exactly. So to do two things would be good for folks right now. First, all you have to do to access Indra's Net, and a lot of you are already feeling it, and you're feeling like there's this presence around you of other people somewhere in the world who are like you. And pretty much almost every one of my clients is saying this on their own without me prompting them. So it's really up in consciousness right now. But all you have to do is in meditation, kind of feel like you're falling back into a big trampoline or net. And as you feel that, allow yourself to perceive all the connections that are in your body and all the connections that you have to everything else around you. And let those connections actually take a form for you. And if you're bad at visualizing, just feel it. Feel the net. Feel like there's all these connections. There's connections between atoms and electrons and atoms and other atoms and molecules and cells. And there's connections all the way through, creating this universe that's moving. But all those connections remain all the time because they are coming from the same place, the field of consciousness that we might call source. So that's Indra's Net. And then how do you use it? Well, you can ask for different things. You can say, show me or allow me to feel the people in the world that are like me. Are there others? And you'll feel this huge, immense presence of incredible amount of people, but it won't be annoying. It won't be loud like the internet is. It'll be their souls. It'll be their presence instead of their egos. So there's that. And then in Indra's Net, there's no trauma that's going to block stuff, because trauma really has a place in other places. Indra's Net is one of those places where the only duality that exists is me and you. And there's not any other duality there, me and you. And you can say that to anything, your coffee cup and you, the flower outside and you, but ultimately you feel connected to everything there. So that really nice, pure place of just me and you, not politics, not economic systems falling apart, not crazy stuff going on with the weather. These things, they're not really there in Indra's net. That's why the virtual world keeps trying to make a copy of it. And instead of me and you, it's ones and zeros. But it's a poor copy because Indra's net, you can feel. You can feel it emotionally in your body. It's naturally part of you. It's natural. So there's a big difference. Indra's net, if you go on the internet, you're going to be bombarded with things that say, is something wrong with you? You might need this cream, right?
Yeah.
But on Indra's net, all you get is you're so special. We love you. We're so glad you're here. Without you, there'd be a big hole. We're so glad that you're here. Imagine being on a network that actually keeps telling you how beloved you are. That's Indra's net. And you can really feel nourished by that. No matter what you go through, it's there. And so that's really important for people to tap into. The other things that people can do is there's two techniques I like to use. Sometimes the collective will show up in my consciousness. Now, I'm not a collective empath, but many of you are. And you're quite miserable most of the time because the collective is going through a lot of hell. They're trying to become a new species, so it's really rough right now. And many changes are upon them, many factors, many mitigating factors that never have ever happened anywhere in the entire galaxy ever. So we're really in new waters, consciousness. So there's a lot of pressure. And when you feel the collective, all you need to do is zoom out a little bit, because all that is happening is that you and the collective need to have a little attention. And so you're zooming out and you're saying, collective, what do you need from me today? What energy can I bless you with? And the collective is going to say many things. If I tap into it now, the collective is saying, like, no one's listening to me. I feel so alone. I'm so terrified of myself. I hear that from the human collective right now, right this moment. And so what do? We got to give the collective a hug. So if the collective was a being with eyes, look into its eyes and ask it, collective, what can I do for you right now? And I hear them say, I want an experience that's real. And so I can say, well, I know what's real. Light is real. So I'm going to give you light and I'm going to give you a hug. And I'm going to share that with you. And so if the collective is a being with eyes, what is it really asking from you today? And then give it freely, as if it was a being that really needed help, a friend of yours, because they are. Collective is your friend. They're your brothers and sisters. They're children of God, just like you. And so the other thing I like to do is I'll zoom out and ask the earth. And I'll say, Gaia, what do you need from me today? And she'll also give me some things that she needs. And it can be very simple things. Like right now, I just need you to pay attention to the changes that are going on my body. So then I might actually study some of the wind maps and the weather maps going on and notice like, has there been any solar flares the past few days? Has there been any CMEs, coronal mass ejections? These things dramatically affect the earth. And so sometimes when I'm being led to pay attention to that, something has happened. And it's worth me just putting my attention on it and saying, thank you, Gaia, for taking on such an incredible role with all of us as your children. We're children of her too. So we can be there for our mother, just as we can be there for our friend, the collective. And this can look also very personal as small acts of kindness. And I'm sure, Sandra, that part of your deep, deep heart religion is those little acts of random kindness. And they are a part of mine too. And they really do make a difference. I've seen miracles happen because of it. Very strange things have occurred because of those kinds of things. Like, I remember one time I was in a grocery store and there was an obese woman in front of me, very sick, very clearly hating herself and feeling guilty because she was buying some ice cream and some chips and some soda, you know. And I think she knows that these things are bad for her, but she's got an addiction because sugar makes people feel connected to God, like all the communions of the earth do. And so, you know, she's simply missing information that would help her, but she feels judged. She's feeling really bad and terrible about herself, and she was in her addiction and couldn't escape. And so I saw someone who's in an incredible false light universe, a little hell, right? And so I reached out, I touched her shoulder, and I said, "Blue is really your color." That's all I said, because she was wearing a blue shirt. And it was true. I wasn't lying. And she could feel that. And I went out, got in the car, and one of my angels appeared when I had angels following me around at that time. And this angel appeared and said, "You just saved her life. She was going to kill herself tonight."
Mm.
And I'm like, seriously? One compliment like that. That's all she needed. It's all. It's amazing how little people really need to get by. It's amazing what one hug or one phone call or one good morning, one little compliment. You can find one thing about anybody around you
Yes.
to say to them. Like, "I love the color of your beard," to the crazy old Vietnam vet next door, you know, who everybody hates because he gets drunk and screams at the sky.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just naming random things. People, even people I've known, like, "What a nice beard." My favorite is there's this schizophrenic guy in Seattle who was always behind the same bar that I'd hang out at, and I can't. Everybody had like a nickname for him, like Schizo Bob or something like that, right? And he'd talk to these beings, and that's the thing, is schizophrenics are seeing other dimensions a lot of time. And he's talking to them, and he's cracking jokes to them, and he's like, one of them, this being that he's seeing, and it's sometimes I can see him too, and he is clearly demonic, and this thing's trying to mess with them, and he's like, "Chill out, dude, chill out. Everything's fine. We're gonna be fine." And he's talking to a demon. And I went over to Bob, and I'm like, "Bob, you have such a big heart. You have such a big heart. You're even kind to the demons who want to hurt you. I am amazed at your heart." Like, "Well, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Got to keep a smile on my face. That's the only way to live." You know, that's humanity right there. That's the truth. So find something. Find one thing good to say to somebody.
Yeah.
It'll count. That's what we can do. It's this stuff. This is foundational level stuff that we need to buff out our floors here.
Well, I was going to say, what's the best way to cope or juggle right now? And that's just random acts of kindness to yourself and to others in your own postage stamp, your own home. Even if you're talking to your plants on the way out the door, or thank you to the doorknob that's assisting you in opening up the door with ease,
Yes.
just little things. I'm like that. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, if a camera was to follow me around all day, I would probably be friends with Schizo Bob. But
Me too. I was.
because I'm like, that's my normal and I'm okay with it. I'm
That's right.
okay with it.
I'll give another example.
Please.
I used to work in soup kitchens as a young person. So I started out like in middle school, elementary school, middle school, all the way through high school. And even into adulthood, I'd always volunteer at soup kitchens. And I encourage all of you to do that, because anybody can become homeless and need to eat at a soup kitchen. Anybody, even me. And I've been homeless twice. And I learned so much about humanity in the soup kitchens. And the other thing that I did, and you will too, it doesn't matter what age you are, just go serve at one. And like ask questions, like find out who are these people, like actually find out what their lives are like. You'll be amazed at who they really are. I've met straight up PhD level college professors who had basically every bad thing that could have possibly happened all at once happen and ruin their lives. But they even had hope, like this is temporary. I'm gonna get through this, but this is really hard right now. And thanks for being compassionate and hearing my story. People's stories are very important. The human story is very key to all of this. I think that's coming up right now today in the voice. But that's why I'm kind of telling some of these stories. One of them was I used to work at a park and rec facility in my hometown, Olympia, Washington. And I would get set up with different kinds of disabled teens and adults, and we'd go on day outings. And most of them were strangers to me, so I wouldn't know them until I had met them, and then we'd go to get pizza and a movie. Or one time we took a whole group up to Chinatown to go get, authentic Chinese food. And we were at a pizza place one afternoon, and this man had severe autism, and he was mostly non-functional. But the one thing that he could talk about was every address of every Safeway in Washington State. So I decided that that's totally fine with me, and that we're going to talk about every address of every Safeway. And so I'm trying to think of every town that I can think of in Washington State and just drill this dude while we're eating pizza. And I'm like, all right, Tacoma. And then he names off all the Safeway addresses in Tacoma. All right, Puyallup. All right, Bellingham. And it was that's what we talked about. And what it takes, the lesson being, get yourself in a position where you're willing to actually be at a conversational connection level with the people around you, and stop this whole idea that you don't want to talk about the weather, even though grandma loves to talk about the weather. That you don't want to talk about the weather, that's pointless chit chat. None of it is now. None of it is. There is no pointless chit chat. I realized that we can get real pretentious real quick being mystics. We want to talk about mysticism and now everything is spiritual. But you know what? Safeway addresses are spiritual. And that's your job, is to figure that out. How whether it rained this afternoon or not is spiritual or not. It's all spiritual. That's Tantra. That's Tantra for you. The other one is that there was this young man who had cerebral palsy. And I didn't know what cerebral palsy was. I was 14. So I thought he couldn't talk or think. I thought he was mentally disabled too, but he wasn't. He was a genius trapped in a 14-year-old's body who couldn't move hardly at all. And so when I first met him, I didn't even greet him because I didn't know he was cognizant. And I greeted his mom. And then I'm in the train with him, and there's a guy next to us who has cerebral palsy too, but he's like in his 40s, and he's got his 3 kids with him. He's married and has children. And here's this young man next to me, and he's just thrilled that a cute 14-year-old girl's decided that she's cool to go to Seattle with him. And that's never happened to him. And I'm not disturbed by any of it at all. And realizing suddenly, because of this guy, that this kid is perfectly mentally fine. And I felt really ashamed. And I told him, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. And he's like, that's okay. I don't know a lot about you either. But he could barely speak. So he was speaking very, very slowly. And this is my other lesson is be patient. Be patient. Because grandma might have some great stories that you're missing because you're not willing to talk to her about the weather. And those stories have so much richness in them. So as I'm listening to this kid, we came up with a plan that if I could figure out what his sentence was, that I'd say it and then we'd move on. And that sped up our conversation. And thankfully I'm super psychic, so it worked really well. And meanwhile, we're figuring out a lot of different things, and I'm learning about cerebral palsy. And this other guy, he's like, yeah, keep talking. He's like, I was like you, I couldn't speak, but now I can speak really clearly because I've worked really hard at it. And I got a career and I got married and have children. Like he's telling this young kid, like, you can be sexy too, don't worry. Just because you can't feed yourself right now doesn't mean you're not going to be able to.
Sure.
I mean, incredible power in this moment. And I'm like, I'm just stunned at this whole thing on this train. We get off the train and that guy in that wheelchair says, I'll see you in heaven. You won't recognize me. I'll be walking.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow. And I learned so much from this kid. He taught me so much. He blew my mind. He was a genius. And I can't remember his name for the life of me, but I'll never forget him because he changed everything. Because what you look at when you see somebody, an obese lady in front of you, when you look in the mirror and you say, God, I'm so ugly today, which I often have problems with myself. I've had dysmorphia. And I look in the mirror and I'm like, I look deformed. That's what I see. It's a physical problem. It's a way my brain's wired, and it's something you can fix. But here's how you fix this problem of you not feeling comfortable with humanity. It's an illusion. There are incredible enlightened souls in a human body having a human experience, just like that little guy was a genius kid in a 14-year-old's body who couldn't even feed himself. That's no different than you or your neighbor. They're immortal, courageous souls having a human experience right now with you at one of the greatest, most difficult parties that has ever been thrown, called the age of the end of ages, and the time to become a new species, and the black wave of consciousness, the hammer coming down on ego. This is happening to everyone. And all of us are immortal souls with all this incredible light moving through us. See it for what it really is. They are not their bodies. They are not their complaints. They are not their personalities. They are none of those things. Zoom out a little bit. Look from above. What do you really see? You're going to see the truth. These are souls like you who are extraordinary, have extraordinary power. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been invited to be in a human body. And you have power enough to clean up all your DNA, to clean up your trauma, to remember your true soul's history, to remember why you're here, to draw in the exact suffering that you need to grow. And that's what you're doing. So this is how we cope. This is how I cope. I try to always see the truth. I cut through illusion. I am luminosity. I can cut through illusion. And the illusion is that that guy's really an angry, drunk Vietnam vet, or that that guy Bob was a schizophrenic, or that that guy really could only think about Safeway addresses. That's an illusion. That's the illusion. If you're willing to embrace the illusion and say, I'm going to totally find spirituality and Safeway addresses right now. I'm going to totally find a way to love this crazy guy who keeps yelling and getting drunk every night. I'm really going to love this guy. What's it going to take? What does he really need? What if you just showed up and sat with him and just listened? And that's spiritual. So this is key, is cutting through the illusion. What is spiritual and what's not? Oh, that's not spiritual. I don't want to talk about crap like that. That's so annoying. You're missing half of it then.
Yeah. Well, I
You're
never
missing
know
half
where
of the, I don't want suffering.
we glitched there, so I think I talked over you. I apologize. I always am just so blown away at where our conversations go, because I just I'm just like in awe of listening to you, because it brings the big picture into little micro moments that you can make the biggest difference. And sometimes, for me, if I align my energy, I can just sit there and just hold the space so other people can just talk about the weather or talk about things that I may not personally find super important, but they need the moment for someone to listen and to be able to express. And so we're exchanging energy throughout all of it, and that's a random, it really shouldn't be a random act of kindness. It should just be a daily routine for people to just be fully present for all of those that are around you, because everyone's working just as hard to gain patience and understanding and make a living and all these things that we need to do as humans, while feeling an immense amount of being uncomfortable with who we are, the pain, the suffering. We don't know what other people are going through. We know what we go through. And those acts of kindness towards us have us stop, drop, sit, connect in our compassion.
Yes.
By going, wow, that person just said, whoa, that was
yeah, you can get some
wow,
good
like,
stuff out of grandma.
exactly.
There's
Well,
another, there's this YouTube video on like a TED Talk about this guy and how he regularly he's this big black guy and he regularly goes to KKK meetings and he always makes friends.
Good for him.
And I love it. It's such a good TED Talk because he talks about, what does it really take to really become the best version of you? You've got to go follow all of your discomfort and your fear. Whatever makes you uncomfortable, get closer to it. Somebody might be really uncomfortable with like Trump supporters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody's uncomfortable with leftists. You should go hang out and talk and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And don't sit and try to share an opinion.
Right. You're not there to convert. You're just there to be present.
Yeah, just say, all right, this is making me uncomfortable. And I really wonder why. You're only going to find out why if you go show up.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you $10 that most of the people who hear me tell them to go to a soup kitchen are like, oh no, I'm not, I would never do that. My kid's dad, I said to him, I said, the town we used to live in, his hometown, it's a very small, mainly Southern Baptist town, very deeply Christian town. And I said, I noticed there's never any kind of soup kitchens there. And he's like, oh, no. No one would get caught dead at a soup kitchen, even if they were starving. And I said, why? And he's like, because they're more afraid of judgment than they are starving. And
Wow.
and I said, what if instead of being called a soup kitchen, they called it a community meal? Would they go then? And he's like, yeah, they would.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I mean, really think about that.
Yeah.
And in Olympia, the people who came, they had to. They had no choice. It's a bigger city. So they might have felt shamed. They might have felt judged to a certain extent, but the people who ran the kitchen didn't feel that way. They had people who did have jobs and homes and lives come anyway too, just because they enjoyed it, because it was a community meal, and everybody who served there ate too. So, I want people to switch up the mindset. If grandma likes talking about the weather, what if you swapped your mindset and said, that's spiritual too. I want to hear what grandma has to say. And, that's the kind of stuff I'm trying to relay today is how do we navigate this? How do we get through this when it's hard and when we feel alone? Well, that's the illusion, guys, that it's hard and that you're all alone. That's an illusion. When you connect in every way possible, because it's a spiritual act, and it's an act of mysticism and an act of power, to show up, to be in service, to help somebody enjoy talking about Safeway addresses for an hour, then you do not feel alone anymore. And you cut through the illusion, and you recognize what the job really is. And that's to unify. You know what cuts through a wave? A unified body of power. So as this wave of dense, dark energy comes down upon us, as we continue to be unified through these acts of kindness and love, then we cut through what it does to us when we stand alone. It crushes you if you're alone. But if you stand in unity and say, everything's spiritual, everyone is spiritual, all of this is spiritual, just start there and start following what makes you uncomfortable and go face it and actually sit in it and recognize it without trying to do anything different to it. No one needed to fix Schizo Bob. He was happy. And he would tell you so. It's like, oh, I'm great. I'm so happy. Man, that guy. And he was definitely not alone. So,
well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here today. Please tell our viewers where they can reach you, and I'll have the links in our description as well.
My pleasure. So my website is seerandscientist.com. It's SEER and scientist.com, all spelled out in one word. And you can connect with me there. And I have lots of classes and different things coming up, and community calls each month. And of course, interviews like this with Sandy, which I enjoy doing so much. Thank you, Sandy, for listening to me today.
I feel so lucky. I feel so lucky. I really do. It's such a wealth of knowledge. And like I said, I never know where we're going to go because we didn't have anything really. I just love where we go. It just is always so powerful and so important in this moment and moving forward. So Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share. Your support is very important to us. Leave us a message, and please check out seerandscientist.com, and we'll see you on the next show. Bye.
Bye-bye.